So I'm going to talk through, as it says there, who are we, a bit to start with, because we're relatively new on the scene, and then a bit more on what I think the opportunities are at the end. So I could have the next slide, please. So this is our, this is our ambition. We have an ambitious ambition, it would be fair to say, to help New Zealand farmers reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions by 30% by 2030 and to near zero by 2040. And that is a very ambitious ambition, as you would all agree, especially since we are predominantly a pastoral grazing system. In fact, almost all of our system is pastoral. I was involved in the setup of AgriZeroNZ in 2022, and we formed on the 1st of February 2023. And we work in partnership with the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre. And as John Roach said earlier today, 50% of New Zealand's emissions come from agriculture. So, you saw there before, I think California was 8%. For us, this is a huge challenge and a huge opportunity, which is why we exist as an organisation. If I could have the next slide, please. So you can see there our purpose as well. I won't read it out to you, but we are focused on catalysing funding, supporting farmers across all of the New Zealand farming systems, de-risking delivery of the targets by working together with others in New Zealand and in other countries. We also are a public-private partnership, so half of our funding comes from 9 private sector companies, 3 dairy companies, 2 meat processors, 3 banks and 1 fertiliser company, all based in New Zealand. We have $183 million of funding over 4 years, which is about $110 million US dollars. And we are entirely focused on methane and nitrous oxide mitigation. If I could have the next slide, please. So we're split into 3 areas. We are strategy and engagement, which is working around the world and in New Zealand to put more focus in this area, to work very closely with our New Zealand regulators to streamline the regulatory framework, as we call it. There hasn't been an application for a methane inhibitor in New Zealand yet, and we would like to make the system function more smoothly to encourage people to bring tools to New Zealand and help them get through the process. And we are providing support. A ventures fund, which is investing in early stage technology companies. I'll show you some of those later. We're an equity investor in those companies, so we're looking to find people that are developing tools that will work in a New Zealand pastoral system. And obviously, if they work in a New Zealand pastoral system, they'll work in other pastoral systems, but first and foremost for New Zealand. And we have a catalyst fund, which is looking at system-wide unblocking, so funding research that will work across a whole range of different areas, and also looking at building facilities to enable research to be undertaken in New Zealand. So I can have the next slide. So this is a kind of where are we at slide, and we're over there, 2024, rushing towards 2030, I'd have to say, it feels like at the moment. But we're at that early stage of identifying the tools, looking at things we can invest in, helping to streamline that regulatory process I talked about, unblocking those constraints in the system that exist already, and building relationships. It was touched on earlier, this is a global problem, so getting out, meeting people, understanding how we can collaborate, work together. Regulatory approvals in New Zealand, get them in the hands of early adopter farmers. There is some scepticism in some New Zealand farmers around methane and nitrous oxide mitigation. They would say from that earlier slide, we're a tiny, tiny little proportion of global problem. But we need to be part of the solution as well. If everybody says they're a small proportion, nobody does anything. So we need to be part of the solution as well. But we do have some farming groups in New Zealand, some fairly large farming groups that are very keen on having access to tools and trialling them out in their farming systems, be they dairy, be they beef, be they sheep, and seeing how they actually work in practice. So we have people ready to use the tools when they come. Even if they're not commercially available, if we can get them out to them to get them to start using them. And then we want to see at least 2 or 3 tools in widespread use by 2030. We think that combined with all of the other things people have talked about that farmers can do within their systems now, they can make on-farm changes, they can do different things within their farming system, genetics, obviously fertility, animal health, all these things. but we also want some tools for farmers to use, and we want farmers to have choices because they will want to have choices and they may choose to use nothing. If I can have the next one. So these are some of our investment highlights. Remnant Biotech, George Reeves is here today. I see in the audience a bolus. So for a pastoral system, a bolus sounds like a good idea. So lots more work to do there, but we're an early investor with RBT. Hoofprint Biome, a company in North Carolina, very early investor with them, very early stage technology. But we're looking at working with them to develop that technology out. It has some potential for working in a pastoral system. Biolumic, our latest investment, is an investment in a pasture technology. So again, if you can make changes to the seed and you can raise the lipid level of the pasture, it's relatively easy for farmers to do. Will it work at scale? That's something that needs to be proven. And Archaea Bio has been touched on. There's a few people from Archaea Bio team here today. That was our most recent investment. We have also, that's not quite lined up, is it? But we've also invested catalyst investments in the methane and nitrous oxide, methane inhibitor research and the methane vaccine research that was touched on earlier. So AgriZeroNZ working with the science team from there, working with the team from MPI and others, NZAGRC, and trying to get that into a separate entity so that we can put more funding into it, raise more capital, hopefully get some more philanthropic funding that was touched on earlier. So anybody who wants to come and talk to us, Sarah and Deborah from the team are here at the back. Please feel free to come and talk to us about how we could collaborate. For New Zealand, the vaccine, we've called it the Holy Grail. In a broad pastoral system for sheep and deer and beef especially, very challenging, has been well covered earlier, but it would be fantastic if that could be successful, which is why we've invested in the 2 programs. And we're working with others to expand the greenhouse gas research facility in Palmerston North. If I can come on to the next one. So I just thought I'd flag a few things. This has actually been quite well covered by others, a disadvantage of going last, but farmers will need incentives to take up tools. If there's a productivity improvement, fabulous. Some of these tools look like they might have a productivity improvement, but if they don't, there'll need to be some sort of incentive. Now, New Zealand was heading down the route of taxes for farmers to penalise them if they didn't reduce their emissions. That wasn't very politically acceptable, so we didn't have tractors in the street so much, but we did have a very strong vote in the last election, and the government changed, and it was partly because of this issue. But farmers will need some kind of incentive. Now, will those incentives come from processors? Will they come from customers? Will they come from consumers? They're going to need to come from somewhere. And in the New Zealand system, they generally don't come from the government. Our customers have very ambitious Scope 3 targets. I've got a slide, I haven't put it up here, of the Scope 3 targets we're aware of the customers of New Zealand farmers, be they meat or dairy, very ambitious. So they are working with New Zealand farmers and processors to look at how we can improve our system to reduce our emissions and therefore reduce the emissions of their products. And it is very important to us that we deliver that because we've seen what California's doing. We have a very emissions efficient system at the moment, but we won't stay emissions efficient compared to others if we can't take action. And lastly, the tools must be practical in our system. Many of the things we have had approach us, we've looked at 170 different technologies so far, we've invested in 6. Many of them we just can't, either we can't see that they'll work, that's been touched on, or we can't see them working in a pastoral system. But if you are aware of things that might work, we are a sort of seed and A series investor. We will look to follow on. We are very focused, so please come talk to us. And my last slide will have my phone number and email on it. Thank you.